by voice vote that would increase federal oversight of so-called compounding pharmacies that custom mix medications in bulk. That bill would create a national system for tracking prescription drugs from manufacturers to retail pharmacies. Going now live to the House.
On motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or of the ayes and nays are ordered, or on which the vote incurs objection under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Record votes on postponed questions will be taken later. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Okay.
Virginia.
You're not ready? Okay. Mr. Speaker.
From California. Well, for what purposes does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2061 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2061, a bill to expand the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act of 2006 to increase accountability and transparency in federal spending and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from California, Mr. ISSA, and the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend the remarks that include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, substantially the same bill was passed in the previous Congress. The Digital Accountability and Transparency Act, or the DATA Act, is an important piece of legislation in that it will create the opportunity for government to be more efficient, more effective, and more transparent. The American people deserve real accountability in how the taxpayer dollars are spent, now more than ever. It is unacceptable for federal spending on data currently to be so inaccurate, unpredictable, inconsistent, and quite frankly, expensive. Nobody can follow the money at the federal level these days, in spite of the fact that we spend over $82 billion on IT. Political gain is often had or lost every time a major funding, program funding proves to lead to a dead end, whether it's a $1 billion program for the Department of Defense or now the most current challenge, the one faced in healthcare.gov. It's often easy to point fingers. But, Mr. Speaker, if we are going to handle large data in a way in which we get predictable success rather than inevitable failure, we have to start by demanding that data be structured from the day it is created and formatted in a way that it makes it capable of search, aggregating, downloading in bulk, and manipulating, both for the benefit of insiders trying to find accountability and outsiders legitimately exercising their right to know how government is spending their money. The DATA Act will contain a pilot to examine ways to consolidate and streamline reporting requirements. This will decrease the burden of federal financial reporting for agencies and for states, school systems, and other recipients of federal dollars. We found during the Recovery Act that the Recovery Board, using DATA Act-type transparency, was able to find huge amounts of waste, fraud, and abuse and do it in a transparent way and in real time because they required recipient reporting. Recipient reporting in a perfect world would already have taken place, but we recognize that consolidating and improving the way in which data is compiled needs to come first. Therefore, between the pilot in this bill and, in fact, the requirement that we begin structuring data the way the SEC and other agencies have, will, in fact, make this legislation a money saver for the federal government. The DATA Act is bipartisan and bicameral and widely supported. A companion legislation was introduced in the Senate by Senator Warner and Senator Portman. Their legislation is substantially similar and will be easily made into a consolidated bill, one the American people can have confidence was thought of over multiple Congresses, well vetted, and in fact assure the American people that we will not make in the next Congress and in Congresses beyond some of the mistakes that have been made in the past. With that, I ask for early consideration of this version of the Act and would note that we passed out of our committee unanimously and by voice, not just in our committee, but in the last Congress, a bill substantially similar. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from the District of Columbia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The lady is recognized.
I'm pleased to rise in support of H.R. 2061, the Data Act, and I'm pleased to work with the chairman as we continue to reconcile this bill with the Senate bill. The Data Act will provide the public with information about how the government is spending its money. This will hold agencies accountable for their spending, and it will result in a more effective and efficient government. The President emphasized the importance of access to data when he issued an executive order on May 9, 2013 that requires government information to be released in ways that make it easy to find and use. The Data Act would require government spending data to meet those same requirements through data standards issued by the Office of Management and Budget. The bill also requires that spending data be available through a single website. H.R. 2061 authorizes, in addition, the Recovery Act Board through the year 2017 and requires the Recovery Board to conduct a pilot project involving direct reporting of spending information from recipients of federal money. There are a couple of issues that I hope will be resolved as the bill moves forward to the Senate. During the committee markup of this bill, Ranking Member Elijah Cummings requested that the bill be amended to address two specific concerns. One of those concerns was the need to ensure that stakeholders have an opportunity to provide feedback before OMB decides whether to extend the pilot project on recipient reporting. The other issue was the need to ensure that OMB has the option to extend all the requirements under the pilot project or just some of the requirements if the director determines that is the best course. Just as the chairman led H.R. 2061 through our committee on a bipartisan basis, I'm hopeful that Chairman ISSA will work on the same basis to address these outstanding issues. This, however, is a good bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. I recognize the gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, it's now my pleasure to yield to the gentleman from Virginia, the leader of the House and a supporter of big data reform.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from California, and I want to thank him as well as the gentlelady from the District of Columbia for their work on the Data Act. And, Mr. Speaker, I do rise today in support of the Digital Accountability and Transparency Act. The American people deserve a functioning government that is both open and accountable. The Data Act is an important step to achieving this goal because it will publish federal spending data and transform it from disconnected documents into open, searchable data for people to see and read through online. This easily accessible data will create an abundant amount of resources and opportunities for innovation to occur. It will bring about new startups and innovators, all of which will be aimed toward turning this data into actionable information. This information can then be used to help solve some of our nation's most pressing problems and help all of us better determine where we can better eliminate waste. Over the last year, Mr. Speaker, I had the privilege of visiting a civic startup called Code for America in California. It is an organization that is committed to helping solve problems primarily at the local level. It has a long list of programmers and developers who are ready to take action across the country. They want to use their skills and apply those skills to help government and its citizens be more efficient. But they first need to know when they go into a locality whether the kind of information they need is going to be accessible. We can begin to do that today here at the federal level. With the passage of the DATA Act, we'll be one step closer to the American people being able to hold government bureaucracies accountable. Plain and simple, federal spending data will be easier to access under this bill. You know, Mr. Speaker, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the rollout of Obamacare over the last month. And beyond the core problems of the laws causing the cancellation of individuals' insurance, beyond the core problem of the laws causing the increase in cost to millions of Americans for their health care, one of the more frustrating issues is the lack of transparency on the part of government bureaucracy. We just cannot tell what the information is right now. How many people have really signed up for Obamacare? We don't know whether it's people who have purchased plans on the healthcare.gov site or whether it's people who just put them into their shopping carts. Again, very, very frustrating, not only for folks around the country, but for those of us who want to try and help the situation so that government is not cramming down onto anyone its prescribed method of health care coverage. So the DATA Act is an opportunity for both parties to come together and to demonstrate that we're serious about creating a more open and effective government and about holding government accountable. Let's pass this bill so we can begin to restore trust with the American people. And again, I want to thank the gentleman from California, Chairman DARRELL, ISSA, as well as the gentlelady from the District of Columbia and their work on this bill, the other members of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee for their hard work, and I urge my colleagues to support the bill. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California reserves. Recognize the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman yields back.
I yield myself such time as may consume. In closing, I want to thank the gentlelady from the District of Columbia and particularly note that this has been one of those shining examples of bipartisan behavior by the committee and I suspect the entire Congress. I might note that earlier this month, the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee voted unanimously to pass the Senate version of this act. So upon our passage, we will very shortly be in an opportunity to begin making these kinds of changes, and I look forward to that. I look forward to this kind of legislation in the future. I urge all members to vote positively on this fundamental reform, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2061 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being...
Mr. Speaker, on this I call for the yeas and nays.
Okay, the gentleman from California requests the yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3343.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3343, a bill to amend the District of Columbia Home Rule Act to clarify the rules regarding the determination of the compensation of the Chief Financial Officer of the District of Columbia.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from California, Mr. ISSA, and the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, a capable chief financial officer is paramount to the physical health and integrity and defensiveness of any organization that he or she oversees. The District of Columbia is no exception, just the opposite. The federal city is perhaps the most important place for people to look at a microcosm of whether or not the federal government can be fiscally responsible. In the 1990s, when the District of Columbia was bankrupt, Congress, at its discretion and the direction of this committee, stepped in with sweeping legislation to help the city's sinking financial ship. Included in these reforms was the establishment of an independent chief financial officer to oversee the city's finances. Since the creation of this position, Congress has come to rely on the D.C. CFO to give an objective, unvarnished picture of the city's finances. The D.C. CFO is our best window into the financial status of the federal city. The bill before us today spends no federal dollars. It simply allows the district to use its own locally generated funds to pay its CFO as much as a member of the federal government's senior executive service can receive in total compensation. Now, I know that men and women here on the floor understand the senior executive service, but for those who may not, we have throughout the government hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of positions that are very senior, that make, in fact, at times more than members of Congress. These are specialists. These are highly trained career professionals that, in fact, make up to, but not more than the Vice President. Back in the 1990s, when we created this position, we established an amount that seemed reasonable at the time. Today, establishing a more flexible amount, one that can change over time as the senior executive service changes, makes more sense. Ultimately, there are CFOs throughout government, some of them controlling less responsibility and smaller amounts of funds, and certainly in many cases less significant and complex relationships than that of a city of over 500,000 with countless different departments, including, obviously, the education of children, the security of the federal city, and the like. For that reason, it seems only fitting that we link it to a salary that is can be at least as great as a senior federal service. Now, ultimately, we are not mandating a salary. We are only allowing the city to recruit someone who is created by act of Congress to serve this body as a window into our oversight of the federal city. This legislation was supported unanimously by the Government Reform and Oversight Committee last month, and I urge all members to support this important technical change to the charter for the city of the District of Columbia, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from the District of Columbia is recognized.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I associate myself with the remarks of the chairman. And I rise in support of this important legislation with special appreciation to Majority Leader Eric Cantor, and particularly to Chairman ISSA and Ranking Member Cummings for quickly marking up this bill so that it could come to the floor expeditiously as the district is in the throes of hiring a new CFO. I will have more to say on their indispensable support presently. The District of Columbia's independent chief financial officer is a unique office in the United States created by Congress. The city cannot obligate or expend funds without the CFO's approval, and the CFO cannot be terminated except for cause. Today's bill, which contains a formula developed by Chairman ISSA, is an important example of the Chairman's continuing commitment to assist the city in improving and safeguarding its vital operations. When the current CFO announced his retirement earlier this year, the mayor formed a CFO search committee led by Alice Rivlin, the former head of the DC Financial Control Board, the Office of Management and Budget, and the Congressional Budget Office, and former Mayor Anthony Williams. The search committee determined that the allowable compensation that is in the bill is necessary for the recruitment and retention of a CFO, but the district government does not have the authority under the Home Rule Act to alter the CFO's compensation. This bill would amend the Home Rule Act to permit the D.C. government to pay its CFO an amount that may not exceed the pay of members of the senior executive service in agencies with an Office of Personnel Management Certified Appraisal System. Currently, the Home Rule Act sets the CFO's pay at the basic pay for Level 1 of the executive schedule. The bill's compensation standard, as with the term of an interim CFO under the D.C. Chief Financial Officer Vacancy Act, which we got enacted earlier this year, was established by Chairman ISSA and is supported by the city. I am particularly grateful to the chairman and also to Majority Leader CANTOR for their continued partnership on legislation to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the District of Columbia government. As with today's bill, their assistance was indispensable last month as the Congress, with bipartisan help from the Senate, agreed for the first time to remove the threat of a D.C. shutdown by permitting the city to spend its local funds, its own locally raised taxpayer funds, for the entire fiscal year 2014. Federal agency spending authority expires on January 13th, but the CRO that Congress approved matches the city's responsibility to raise local funds with its right to therefore spend these funds, consistent with budget autonomy for the district, which Majority Leader CANTOR, Chairman ISSA, and Ranking Member Cummings have all supported. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I have no other speakers at this time. Does the gentlelady prepare to close?
I am prepared to close, and again, I want to indicate the gratitude not only that I feel, but the gratitude of the city. The city has chosen a CFO, and fortunately, that matter is still pending because it does have to lay over here in the Congress, and so the city was faced with the kind of an issue that happens when there are two sovereigns that must approve a piece of legislation. And whenever I have had anything approaching that kind of emergency, the chairman has gone out of its way to see to it that we proceeded and the city was not inconvenienced or, dare I say, embarrassed. And I very much appreciate the way in which he expedited this bill, got it on a markup, and there have not been a lot of markups, but he made sure this got on the markup. And I particularly appreciate his innovation in devising a formula that would in fact be approved, as I believe and hope it will today, by this House. And I yield back the balance of my time, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlewoman yields back. I recognize the gentleman from California.
I yield myself such time as it may consume in closing. For my colleague from the District of Columbia, ELEANOR, thank you. Thank you for the work you do for the district. It is our committee's jurisdiction to oversee the federal city, and it's an honor. But it wouldn't be possible if not for the engagement of Delegate Norton, if it wasn't for the cooperation we've had with the mayor and members of the council and with the outgoing CFO. So we don't often get an opportunity on the House floor to talk about, candidly, the fact that we are hosted by a city here. We have jurisdiction over it, but ultimately the day-to-day operation is not a burden to Congress, but rather a benefit to Congress that we have by having this unique relationship. So as I urge all of my members to vote for this important change, I want to thank the Majority Leader and all those who brought this bill in a timely fashion to the floor so that we could make a decision and go to hiring a new CFO, so we would never be without a person to oversee the finances and to report to Congress in a timely fashion so that we can have confidence that the people who so kindly host us, in fact, will remain fiscally responsible and solvent throughout anything that may come their way. So again, to Ms. Norton, I thank her. To Speaker, I thank you for this bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3343? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3487.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3487, a bill to amend the Federal Election Campaign Act to extend through 2018 the authority of the Federal Election Commission to impose civil money penalties on the basis of a schedule of penalties established and published by the Commission, to expand such authority to certain other violations and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Miller, and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Davis, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks on the bill.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield myself as much time as I might consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
And I rise in support of H.R. 3487, reauthorizing the Federal Election Commission's Administrative Fine Program. This program, which was established in the year 2000, provides the FEC with a consistent, transparent process for determining and administering fines for campaign finance reporting violations primarily related to late or incomplete filings with the Commission. It also provides filers with an inexpensive and efficient alternative to full investigations and enforcement proceedings to resolve very minor filing violations. Using a public formula that takes multiple factors into consideration, like length of delay and repeat offenses, the FEC's program simply assesses the appropriate fines associated with a minor violation. For example, if a political action committee or federal candidate files their quarterly expenditures 24 hours past the submission deadline, the administrative fine program will automatically determine the financial penalty using its formula and then send the notification. If there's no dispute, the fine is just simply paid. H.R. 3487 also expands this successful program to include reports filed by other types of organizations if the FEC's commissioners adopt a formula of fines for them. This effective program saves the agency, saves filers and taxpayers money. However, without this bill, the program will expire on December 31st of this year. And with that, I certainly want to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Brady, as well as the other members of our committee, the House Administration Committee, for their support, and they're all supporters of this bill. And I would urge my colleagues to support this reauthorization. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Michigan reserves. Recognizes the gentlewoman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 3487, a bill to reauthorize the Federal Election Commission's Administrative Fines Program through 2018. This program allows the FEC to streamline straightforward disclosure violations and enact a penalty. Since its introduction in 1999, the AFP has improved the enforcement process, decreased late filings, and assessed over $4 million in fines. Reauthorizing the AFP program is a reasonable and it's an appropriate step. The FEC is a small agency charged with the monumental task of overseeing the massive, complex, and eroding campaign finance system, funding system. In the wake of Citizens United, we need them more than ever. Instead, the agency has been mired in partisan games, distracting it from important functions such as conducting audits or issuing regulations, advisory opinions, and enforcement actions. But now, with a new confirmed full slate of commissioners, I look forward to the agency moving ahead and returning to its core duties instead of the partisan squabble of the past. Even though my Republican colleagues and I don't always see eye to eye, on these campaign finance issues. We all agree that the AFP program has been successful, and I'm very proud to stand with Chairman Miller on this issue. I urge all members to support H.R. 3487, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I advise my colleague from California we have no further speakers if you're prepared to close.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge an aye vote, and I yield back the balance of my time as well.
The gentleman yields back. Recognize the gentlewoman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I would just close by saying, as a former Secretary of State from the great state of Michigan, former Chief Elections Officer of my state, I think this is a very common sense, cost-efficient, cost-effective program. It's worked very, very well for the agency, for the FEC, certainly for filers, as well as taxpayers, and I would certainly urge my colleagues to support H.R. 3487 and reauthorize the Federal Election Commission's Administrative Fine Program. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The gentlewoman from Michigan yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 3487? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and concur in the concurrent resolution H.Con.Res 25, which authorizes the use of Emancipation Hall and the Capitol Visitor Center for activities associated with the award of the Congressional Gold Medal to Native American Code Talkers.
Is the gentlelady calling up S.Con.Res 25?
Yes. Yes, I am.
The clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 25, concurrent resolution authorizing the use of Emancipation Hall in the Capitol Visitor Center for activities associated with the ceremony to award the Congressional Gold Medal to Native American Code Talkers.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Miller, and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Davis, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks on the concurrent resolution.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
I rise in very strong support of Senate Concurrent Resolution 25, authorizing the use of Emancipation Hall on November 20th, Wednesday, for a ceremony to award the Congressional Gold Medal to Native American Code Talkers who assisted the United States military and our allied powers. This ceremony, Mr. Speaker, is a very long overdue recognition of all Native American Code Talkers that served this nation during times of foreign conflict. And although the contributions of the Navajo Code Talkers during the World Wars have been the most celebrated, many, many other Native American tribes deserve recognition for their courage and dedication to this nation as well. Thousands of Native Americans from over a dozen tribes across the country saw the threats to humanity being posed and joined with our military forces to protect our common homeland. And it was a call to action that they selflessly accepted and successfully accomplished. And I certainly want to thank our former colleague from Oklahoma, Mr. Bourne, for his leadership on H.R. 4544, the Native American Code Talkers Act, which provides for this overdue recognition and celebration. And, Mr. Speaker, I urge all my colleagues to support this resolution.
The gentlewoman from Michigan
and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I join the Chair in supporting S.Con.Res 25, which authorizes the use of Emancipation Hall for a ceremony to award the Congressional Gold Medal to Native American Code Talkers. I'm very pleased to support the efforts to honor these patriotic Americans and their service to our nation during some of its most trying times. This honor is extremely well deserved, and I urge my colleagues to support this resolution. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's my great honor to recognize the member from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole, who's a member of the Rules Committee, also was recently named last week as the chairman of the Subcommittee on Legislative Branch Appropriations, and also Mr. Cole is a member of the Chickasaw Nation and a member of the Chickasaw Hall of Fame as well. My great privilege to recognize him for as much time as he may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend, the chairman, for yielding me the time and for gracious remarks. Mr. Speaker, Native Americans have fought against, with, and for the United States more than any other group of people in the history of our country. And it's still true today. Native Americans enlist in the American military at a higher rate than any other race or ethnicity in the United States. That sense of protecting one's place and one's land, which is such an integral part of Native American history, is deep and alive, and it's benefited this country. As my friend the chairman mentioned, most Americans are certainly aware of the distinguished role of the Navajo code talkers in the Second World War. What many of them are not aware of, though, is how many others served, not only in that war, but as far back as the First World War. This ceremony will recognize 33 tribes whose members are considered DOD, Department of Defense, code talkers. 10 of those tribes are from my home state of Oklahoma, and 3 of them, the Choctaws, the Comanches, and the Kiowas, reside in my district. It's a privilege for me as a Native American to support this resolution and urge its adoption. It's right that we recognize the contribution of these Americans, the first Americans, who were so often, in the time in which they contributed to the defense of our country, discriminated against, and in some cases in the First World War still did not have the rights of other American citizens. Most Native Americans did not actually achieve the right to vote until 1924. So the fact that they were willing to go and lay their life on the line, assist this country, I think speaks volumes about their patriotism and their commitment. So I thank my friend for bringing the resolution to the floor. I look forward to voting in its support, and I urge its adoption by the House.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Michigan reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's my great privilege now to recognize for as much time as he may consume Representative Mullin from Oklahoma, who is a member of the Transportation Infrastructure and also Natural Resources Committee. He's also a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. For as much time as he may consume, to the distinguished member from Oklahoma.
The gentleman is recognized.
I'd like to thank the gentlelady from Michigan for yielding time for me to speak on such an important issue. You know, Cherokee Nation has a rich history of pride and heritage inside this country. At a very young age, I had the special privilege of meeting a gentleman, another former member of Cherokee Nation, Wayne Russell. Wayne Russell was taken care of by my grandparents, who my granddad, Kenneth Morris, is also a Cherokee member who fought in the European theater as a combat engineer. Wayne Russell was a neighbor of my granddad, and my grandmother and my granddad took care of Wayne until the day he passed away. But at a young age, I got the privilege of getting to know him. See, we shared the same birthday, and so it was a common bond for us. And Wayne used to tell me stories how he got to use his native language to help this great nation win a war against a group of individuals that had very bad intentions, not just in their country, but on this world. See, Wayne never asked for anything. Wayne simply stood up each day and did his job when he was in uniform. But when he came home, he didn't ask for anybody to give him anything. He didn't ask for a handout. He was just proud to serve. Before I even knew what Code Talkers was, Wayne used to tell me about it all the time because he used to teach the Cherokee language in the school I went to in Westville. And so Wayne would talk to me in our native tongue and tell me about the stories that he had over in the war, and he didn't realize he was special. I didn't really realize he was special, but today I get to stand up and talk about him. What an honor it is for me to stand on this House floor as a member of the United States Congress, and I get to bring Wayne Russell's name up, and I get to tell people what he did. Now, he's passed and he's gone, and when he left me all his medals. And we get to stand up this week and we get to vote on something to honor not just a Cherokee member, but the members of Native Americans through Indian country all across this great nation that didn't ask for anything. They just simply did their job. They didn't realize they were special. They just did what it took to win, because we have pride in Indian country. We take pride in this great country we call America. And for us to stand up today and speak out for them, what an opportunity this House gets to reach across the aisles and show bipartisan support to honor a group of people. So it's an honor to stand up here. It's an honor, Mr. Speaker. And it's an honor that the gentlelady from Michigan has given me to bring up Wayne Russell and talk about something that's so important to me and all of Indian country. So I urge my colleagues to support this. And let's stand together and say thank you to a group of people that's well overdue. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Michigan reserves. The gentleman from California, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I must say, I hope that all of us are looking forward to this ceremony, because I think it's going to be a very impressive one and give us a chance to honor, again, these wonderful patriotic Americans. I urge an aye vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know how I follow on for the two previous speakers we had on our side that talked so very eloquently from their heart about their pride in their heritage and their pride as being Americans and now as members of the Congress, and with this bipartisan bill. And it is a ceremony that I tell my colleague from California we are all looking forward to. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, certainly a ceremony that is long, long overdue for the recognition for the all Native Americans and particularly these code talkers and what they did to keep America free, great ambassadors of liberty and freedom and democracy. And with that, I would just urge all of my colleagues to support Senate Concurrent Resolution 25, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Michigan yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to Senate Concurrent Resolution 25? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The concurrent resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 272 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 272, a bill to designate the Department of Veterans Affairs and Department of Defense Joint Outpatient Clinic to be constructed in Marina, California as the General William H. Gourley Federal Outpatient Clinic, a joint VA-DOD healthcare facility.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Winstrup, and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Davis, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 272, which designated the Department of Veterans Affairs and Department of Defense Joint Outpatient Clinic to be constructed in Marina, California as General William H. Gourley VA-DOD Outpatient Clinic. I want to commend Representative Sam Farr of California for sponsoring this legislation. Mr. Speaker, the late Major General William H. Gourley gave this nation 36 years of committed and distinguished service in the United States Army. That service took him to far-off places such as Vietnam, Korea, Turkey, and Germany, where he had an immediate and positive impact on the soldiers and officers with whom he served. When General Gourley's service to the nation was done, he returned to his beloved Monterey, California to retire. He became actively involved in the Monterey community, helping to oversee the restructuring of Fort Ord for civilian reuse following the base realignment and closure decision to shut down that Army post. Mr. Speaker, General Gourley was also instrumental in paving the way for the joint VA-DOD outpatient clinic to be constructed in Marina, California, which is why it's fitting that that clinic, which when completed will serve our active duty and retired military, their families, and veterans, be named the General William H. Gourley VA-DOD Outpatient Clinic. General Gourley dedicated his life to serving the military. The VA-DOD Clinic will stand as a reminder of his service to all those who will benefit from the health care provided by the clinic in the future. Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Major General William Gourley was truly a soldier's soldier. His long and storied career can be summed up by the motto he took with him across the Army to every unit he commanded: soldiers first. He insisted that support of the military must focus on the needs of soldiers, and this mantra soon became the standard across the entire Army personnel community. After more than 30 years in uniform, General Gourley continued fighting for the well-being of soldiers and their families. His bigger-than-life persona and caring nature endeared him to active-duty soldiers and veterans alike. And he could often be seen at the former Fort Ord, at the commissary or the PX, inquiring as to how service members were and how he could help them. He was a fixture at the local VA clinic, but dreamed of a larger facility that could seamlessly integrate care over the life of a soldier. It was this desire, coupled with his penchant for helping others, which led him to play an instrumental role in the planning and development of the soon-to-be joint VA-DOD hospital. It would only be fitting to see this new and innovative facility named after a true American hero.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I have no further requests for time. I am prepared to close after my colleague has yielded back her time. I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserved. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield such time as he may consume to the sponsor of this legislation, my colleague from California, Mr. Farr.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Congressman Davis, for yielding. I rise in support of, obviously, the legislation I've authored, but I really appreciate the statements that are made here about General Gourley. He was a very special human being, just a tall stature, an incredible soldier, a retiree who kind of brought together the retiree community of the military in the entire Monterey Peninsula. We still have 9 military missions, including the Naval Postgraduate School, the Defense Language Institute, where all the languages of the world are taught, the Manpower Development Center, Fort Hunter Leggett, Camp Roberts, and so on. So we have a lot of military there, and he recognized that not only do the active duty soldiers, men and women in uniform who have a clinic at the Defense Language Institute, but really their spouses and children who have to live off the TRICARE. A lot of the doctors in the community wouldn't accept TRICARE because the reimbursement rates are so low. So here were underserved populations. There was a widow population of military retirees who, after the base closed and the hospital closed, where there was space available, that weren't really familiar with how to use TRICARE or find TRICARE doctors. There was the active duty military, and then there was this incredible veterans community. So for the first time in the history of this country, we got the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Defense together and decided that they ought to plan a clinic. And General Gourley was so instrumental in getting that kind of one-stop, proud to serve opportunity to be in a design of a building and an operation of a building. And it was no small task, because although these agencies want to be joint, and I always remind people that you can't be a veteran without having walked through the Department of Defense first. So everything, in the old days, you had to, when you left the Department of Defense, then you had to find your way, find your papers, and get them all transferred and do all this heavy lifting, and there was always bureaucracy and loss of papers and loss of stuff. And so this one-stop system, which we all think is much more cost-effective and a proud way to say thank you to those that serve, is really going to be implemented in this brand new clinic that we just broke ground for on Veterans Day a week ago. And so from my seat on the Military Constructions Appropriations Committee, I've learned that, you know, we really need to find this unity. And so when we have found it, and it was always advocated by General Gourley, unfortunately he passed away. He passed away a couple of years ago, but just before he passed away, I was able to do an oral interview with him to archive in the Library of Congress, because Congress has developed this oral history archive, and I would urge all my colleagues in Congress to take part in doing these interviews with veterans and to archive their experience, because he served in many, many places in this country. He was always a leader and outspoken. He was critical of things that need to be criticized, but he did things like when he was head of the War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, he insisted that soldiers couldn't come to class unless they brought their wives. He was those spouses who would come to understand that the Army mindset and the form of greater bond within the family around is a shared duty and shared sacrifice. So in that sense of unity, he always used to say, leave a better Army. Leave it better than you found it. And I think he left this world a lot better than he found it. And so one way the community would like to pay tribute to him for his incredible using his retirement to continue to bring this collaboration and thinking outside the box together is to name this new clinic after him. And he would be so proud. I was at his burial at Arlington National Cemetery in 2008. And in honor of his lifetime of service to our country, to our troops, to our veterans, I'm really proud to have introduced this bill to name the clinic after this American hero. I'm proud to have been his friend, and I ask your support in passing the bill. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
We have no further speakers, so I'll yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, health care is a morale staple of our military, both in active duty and when we become veterans, whether it's in theater or at home, and knowing that those that have served or are serving know that on the health care side we have their back. General Gourley understood that, and I urge all to vote in favor of this bill to give him the recognition that is due. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 272 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed.
Mr. Speaker, I request that we record the yeas and nays.
The gentleman requests the yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. The Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives. Sir, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the Clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on November 18, 2013 at 4:21 p.m. that the Senate passed without amendment H.R. 3204. With best wishes, I am sincerely, Karen L. Haas.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today. Thanks, guys.
A break here in the House, and as we just heard, members will be back in for votes at about 6:30 Eastern Time on bills that they just debated.